it literally, one was about how Zen fits in society. Like you have religion on one extreme with theism, and then you have rationalism on the other extreme. So a method in theism is prayer, right? A method in scientific rationalism is experiment. Those are the methods they use. The method in Zen is Zazen. So I created like eight dimensions of all three to compare in a grid. So it gives you a handle to talk about how Zazen is partly scientific method, that shares some things overlap with prayer in a way, right? So that was that one. And when they fell apart, so I just I just went through it and took out every commentary section that had anything to do with society at large, kind of thing. And that turned out to be almost to the word half of the manuscript, and what was left was this. So this one is based the original Frontier. Is that the one you remember, Joshua?
I remember
because we've been through reading groups on more than one thing.
Yeah. The chapter that stuck out to me was one where you did a very in-depth review of like a deepening of the senses in stillness.
Yeah, that's in this one.
Okay.
I call it deconstructing the senses.
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome to Atlanta Soda Zen Center, Sunday morning, the 24th of February. This morning, we'll be doing a Dharma dialogue around a contemporary teaching, in this case, one of mine, in which I'm writing a manuscript for publication, working title, The Original Frontier. So I'm going to read through basically the introduction, which I have reworked at the behest of the publisher. Unbeknownst to me, one of my favorite expressions, there's all kinds of stuff that you didn't ask for, right, when you start working on a publication. So be careful what you ask for. Andrew can tell you a lot about publishing. He's published several books, and even though we have all the electronic, digital equipment and methods available, it turns out not to have lessened the author's load that much because the publishers don't do it anymore. You have to prepare the manuscript to fit their program. So they give you codes. That you go and put in. You have, like when I first put this book together, I did it in Word. Most of us are familiar with Word, right? I don't like Word because I was trained in Quark Express, which is a graphical layout program. It's much more refined, you could say. So when I did it in Word, I set it up in what they call book-like fashion. When you look at the page, it's got bold type for a headline and, you know, all the separation spaces and everything and indents. And looks like basically print format. So now they tell me, right? Yes, we're interested in publishing it, but here's how you have to send it back to us. So they send you this manual, and this goes on and on and on about all the, you know, style and coding and their particular in-house things. And
do they want you to print it now too?
That's the next. I think that's next year, maybe. So what you end up doing is you end up selecting all and converting it all to 12-point regular type, no bold, no nothing, and then it's all flush left, and there are no breaks, no spaces. So, and then you put in these little codes and two little, I don't know what those things are called, two little arrows pointing both ways inside. That's what speaks to the computer. Anybody know? Is there a name for those?
Brackets.
Bracket. It's kind of a bracket, but it's the pointed ones. You know.
Those are angle brackets. Angle bracket.
Angle bracket. Okay. In construction, that means something different.
Right.
So then they give you codes like title, subtitle, thanks. A is a bold headline, number one headline in the thing. There's a B and a C headline you can put in. Hang means this is all indented. Hang means a list, and IND and T means it's indented for a quote, for instance. And then TEXT is what most things are. So as you go through it, you know, if I just selected all and converted it all to regular plain type, then I would have a hard time seeing which were titles, right? So instead, what you have to do is you go through the text and take each title and put in the right code and so forth. So you're coding the text yourself for them. Because I'm sure what they do is they plug it into a machine, and the machine sets it in type for them, shows them the type galleys, right? Anyway, it's a learning curve, but I'm kind of enjoying it. It's a kind of a challenge. And of course, I'm quoting from weird sources like this, okay, which comes from Japan. And it's this kind of book. It's not your normal book, right? It has page numbers, and it has an editor, and it has publishing, so you can sort of frame it in the same endnote or footnote format. I've never done anything scholarly in my life, and so as I went through this, most of you know I do a lot of memorization, and I literally am just typing in quotes that I've memorized, and I know where they're from, so I just put that in the footnote, right? I just put Bindowa or whatever it happened to be, whatever source, but not in the format that it has to be, and not including the publisher and the date and all the punctuation has to be just right. So now I'm going back through 200 plus citations, conforming all of those to, you know, their standards. And in order to do so, because their little pamphlet there doesn't cover everything, I had to get the Chicago manual style. How many ways can you use a punctuation? Well, they're all in there. So anyway, it's of interest. It's kind of fun. I enjoy a challenge. So part of my process I learned in design is you go through brainstorming in a group format where all the parties to the design team hopefully are there, and everybody has a brain, right? So they have something to contribute. There are some people who do football style where you're the quarterback and you tell everybody what to do. But in my training said, no, you know, what we do is we present the problem, and then we as a group try to define the problem by free association as thoroughly as we can. The theory being that if you define it completely, the solution is inherent in the definition, right? And then you need to take the steps. Somebody has to make the decision which way we're going to go when there are variables. So I found writing a book, I wanted to use that same process. So this particular manuscript has been run through, I think, 2, maybe 3 reading groups. And it garnered feedback. And in some cases, there were testimonials. They wrote a brief testimonial, which we sent to the publishers, where they're asking on a form that you fill out, what's different about your book, right? So for me to tell what's different about my book, I would have to read all the other books, right? But if you use a group of 10 or 12 people and you do a couple of those, all of a sudden you have a couple dozen readers who have themselves read a lot of other books. So it's much easier for them to say what's different about this book. And that's basically what they said in the testimonials. So for that part of the form, I just cut and pasted those testimonials in there. So here's what some other people say about it. Here's what I think is different, briefly, but here's what other people say. So I think the same group process I'm continuing with using you as guinea pigs at this moment. I'm going to read this to you, and if it's redundant or you've heard it before, forgive me, but I want to get some more feedback on this. So I'll go through it rather quickly, just the introduction. I may drop down to the bottom and recap the bottom, the end. And then I want to sort of take your temperature on it, see what you think. you're all involved in this practice of Zen, and this is for people who are practicing Zen. It's called The Original Frontier, subtitled The Serious Seeker's Guide to Zen, Rediscovering the Trusting Mind in the New Age of Uncertainty. It's kind of placing it in a cultural context similar to the other one, but not quite as much of a focus. It's just, we're all facing this daily madness. And I think Zen holds the proposition forth that Zen can help. If everybody practiced Zen, it could help broadly. So then the contents are introducing the original frontier, designing a Zen life. And one of the points I make here is I'm a designer by profession, so that makes my approach a little different from other authors about Zen. Zen, what it is and is not, and Zen meditation, what it is, and then in parentheses, not, with an exclamation point. Those are a little too clever, so I may change those titles. Then deconstructing the senses, embracing non-duality, applying Zen, benefiting from Zen, following the sages, concluding Zen, and then the original frontier. So the last section is recapping back to the original frontier, where I go into more detail on it. Okay, any questions so far? So introducing the original frontier. Welcome to yet another book about Zen. You may reasonably question why anyone would want to add to the vast body of Zen literature. Hasn't enough been written about Zen? Isn't everything that anyone might need to know about meditation, including Zen meditation, already out there? There are plenty of great beginner books about Zen and its method of meditation. There are others that relate stories of the historical founder, Shakyamuni Buddha, and the ancestors of Zen. This book is not about them, but I will introduce you to some of their teachings and a few of my root teacher, Reverend Soyo Matsuoka Roshi. Others analyze the written sutras and commentaries in great detail. I'm putting in parentheses Sanskrit, Buddha, Dharma, and so forth. I'm not going to read those. Others analyze the written sutras and commentaries in great detail. I will quote some when needed for clarification. Many contemporary authors strive to put forth a different take on Zen Buddhist philosophy. For me, Zen is first and foremost a practical way of life, and especially appropriate to the way we live today. Then there's subhead, Age of Anxiety Redux. Matsuoka Roshi would often refer to his era as the Age of Anxiety, the title of a long poem by one of his contemporaries, W.H. Auden. He also would often say, civilization conquers us. It seems that we are even more likely to be filled with anxiety in this new age of uncertainty, driven by major shifts in societies around the world, as well as right here at home, including record levels of immigrants fleeing persecution and poverty. Uncertainty is the new bugaboo du jour, roiling markets as well as political campaigns, giving new meaning to the trope that nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes, attributed to Ben Franklin, amongst others. In this set of rather dire straits, I am somewhat ambivalent about contributing to the babble of voices competing for attention, especially in a saturated marketplace in which new angles on Zen appear in publication frequently. But I also feel compelled to write what I know about Zen from my own personal experience, simply because it has had a profoundly positive effect upon my own life, including confronting uncertainty and its accompanying anxiety. And because I do not believe, in all humility, that anyone else writing about Zen today has quite the same perspective that I have, coming from a background in creativity and design thinking, in addition to a lot of time on the cushion. With this book, I simply want to encourage you to do likewise, to sit still enough for long enough. This is one of the secrets of Zen meditation. I suggest that you eventually seek out a teacher, along with a group of meditators, when the opportunity arises. In any case, I invite you to enter the original frontier. Then the next subtitle, Welcome to the Original Frontier. The original frontier, there's no emphasis in here, but is not limited to any one place, and its existence does not depend upon a specific point in time. It is always here and now, ready, willing, and able to meet and greet us where we are. This is the point of no return we approach in Zen, the very frontier of sentience itself. Abandoning the comfort zone of our familiar conceptual reality, we enter the same strange territory discovered by the historical Buddha, and explored by our ancestral lineage. After all, it has not gone anywhere. There is nowhere for it to go, as Eihei Dogen, 1200-1253, founder of Soto Zen in Japan, reminds us in his first written instructions on Zazen. The way is, this is a quote, the way is completely present where you are, so of what use is practice or enlightenment? However, if there is the slightest difference in the beginning between you and the way, the result will be a greater separation than between heaven and earth. If the slightest dualistic thinking arises, you will lose your Buddha mind. The proper use of Zen practice, then, is precisely to overcome the seeming gap between you and the great way, exaggerated by dualistic, discriminating thinking. Another translation emphasizes the futility of pursuing enlightenment elsewhere on pilgrimage. It is right here if it is anywhere. The frontier Buddha entered 2,500 years ago is still present today, still beckoning to all just over the hill. It is glimpsed from time to time as if from the corner of the eye, but it is so close, so immediate and intimate that it is unperceivable. This is beautifully illustrated by analogy to the moon and snow in the ancient Zen poem Precious Mirror Samadhi by Tozan Ryokai, founder of the Soto Zen in China. Quote, the Dharma of thusness is intimately transmitted by Buddhas and ancestors. Now you have it, preserve it well. A silver bowl filled with snow, a heron hidden in the moon. Taken as similar, they are not the same. Not distinguished, their places are known. In text, as long as we do not arbitrarily distinguish one from the other, they remain in their proper Dharma locations. And suddenly, a pivot from the perceptual to the experiential, the meaning does not reside in the words, but a pivotal moment brings it forth. It's another quote in text. The ostensible gap between our ordinary world and that of enlightenment is so subtle as to be virtually indistinguishable, like white on white. I started to say white on rice, but I don't think that means quite the same thing. In art, it's white on white or black on black. Right? So the ostensible gap between our ordinary world and that of enlightenment is so subtle as to be virtually indistinguishable, like white on white. So slight a fine-tuning of awareness is easily overlooked, as indicated in another stanza from the same poem. Quote, so vast it transcends dimension, so minute it enters where there is no gap. A hair's breadth deviation, and you are out of tune. And you are out of tune. So text again. Like an old-fashioned radio dial, if you move it slightly to the left or right, you hear nothing but static. The title couplet, like facing a precious mirror, form and reflection behold each other, describes what it is like when we tune into the broadcast frequency, suddenly pivoting to a complete merging of both worlds. Am I boring you?
No. It's my lifestyle.
So-called lifestyle, right? Lifestyle in big quotes.
Unexplained the bell for those who are new here.
Okay. Say it again.
Maybe we should.
Oh, the bell. The bell is a Thich Nhat Hanh device to help us pause. Remember that all of these teachings are about our here and now, about this present moment. Not get too far off into the conceptual world that we lose track of where this is pointing us, which is back to the present moment. Thank you. So again, like facing a precious mirror, form and reflection behold each other. How do you image that? That's not, I don't think that works in words. Like facing a precious mirror, what's precious about it? This is, I'm improvising here, I'm not in the text. What's precious about this mirror? Form and reflection behold each other. I think you can sort of image that, but I don't think that's is a thought as such. Form and reflection behold each other describes what it is like when we tune into the broadcast frequency, suddenly pivoting to a complete merging of both worlds, both the enlightened and the ordinary world. So, like water to a fish or air to a bird, the original frontier is too close, too intimate to be an object of perception. But entering into it immediately and radically changes our perception itself. Any and all people at any time and any place can enter this original frontier, no matter their circumstances. So, this is the central message and spiritual legacy of Buddhism. It offers up the wish fulfilling Mani jewel of Indian legend. This gem is said to be hidden somewhere on each person, all unknown to the bearer. But we tend to look for it everywhere else, as did Shakyamuni Buddha until he discovered it in meditation. This is a familiar syndrome, like looking for love in all the wrong places, searching everywhere other than where what we are looking for is actually to be found. As my grandmother would often say, whatever you are missing, you will find it in the last place you look. The flip side is that we hope to leave behind those circumstances we imagine to be the problem. This is the same problem that Buddha confronted in his 6-year quest, the universal koan of suffering. He tried everything to dispel it, but nothing had worked. Then, the story goes, he sat down in desperation, entered into resolute meditation, and found the middle way, blazing the trail to the original frontier for the rest of us. So let me stop there, and there's another headline and a few more to read, and see if anybody has any comment or questions so far.
Can you repeat the phrase about the precious mirror?
Like facing a precious mirror, form and reflection behold each other. And he goes on to say, you are not it, but in truth it is you. This is one of these flips, right? Taking how we ordinarily think about and perceive and flipping it, see, could be the other way around. There's a famous koan or anecdote about, I think, these 2 young monks who Dogen always quotes. They were Dharma brothers. And they're always trying to express their understanding of the truth to each other, this to each other. And one says, one day one says, I think it is like a donkey staring into a well. And when we read these, we want to remember, like Joshu's dog. Does dog have Buddha nature? Yes. Does dog have Buddha nature? No. There was a real dog there, a mascot, right? In this case, they're probably sitting there, and there's a real donkey there, and the donkey's probably looking into a well. So you want to put yourself in these shoes and be the donkey looking in the well, right? Why is a donkey staring into the well? Probably thirsty, right? Can smell the water, can't reach it. Right? So when I was a kid, I grew up on a farm, and I would walk a couple miles to school and into the small town I lived nearby and back, and farm along the way had a donkey. So I would stop and visit the donkey every day. So I know what they look like, feel like, smell like, right? And the other monk says, I think you have about 80% of it. I think it's like the well looking at the donkey. So then Dogen goes on to say, it's the donkey looking at the well looking at the donkey looking at the donkey, the well looking at the well, right? All the possibilities. So did that answer or come close?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else? Anybody else? Anything pop?
I think, for me, what's coming up when you're talking about how this is relative to the now is the constant churn that we all experience constantly. It's just kind of just everywhere and everything that if you can just get still enough, long enough, like you said, you just kind of can get some space. Mm. So that's what's coming up with you.
Yeah, we need a buffer. And you can't, it's hard to find. And that's why we go out in the country on retreats. But I get into that a little bit later about you don't really need to go somewhere else. Right? Okay, let's plunge forward then. So, again, then the story goes, he sat down in desperation into resolute meditation, resolved to die if need be, in fact, to solve this dilemma of suffering, and found the middle way, blazing the trail to the original frontier for the rest of us. So he's blazing the, anybody not know what blazing the trail is? I grew up in the country, so Boy Scout and all that. Had to learn it. What you do is the first person who finds a trail through the woods carries an axe, and they cut a little piece, eye level, out of the bark of the tree. And so it pops out. It's white. You can see the color of the wood. And then by the time you get to another tree, after you leave this tree, you're confronted with all these trees. Once you pass this tree, you need to be able to see another one. There's one there, and so that's where you go. And then you need to see another one. So this is the way you blaze a trail. Coxon, you have to know this, being a forest ranger, right? That's the way the first person who establishes the trail cuts these little notches in the tree so everybody else can see. Don't go that way. There be dragons.
We don't use axes. Flagging.
Do they use paint?
No.
Oh, those little nail flagons thing?
No, it's the tie-on flagging that,
Yeah, like a yellow.
not to harm the tree.
Yellow ribbon.
Even permanently scar it.
Right, right.
Blazings are often moved over feet to the
Right.
left or right. So.
Right. Yeah, some of our country retreats, we've seen that. Where as long as you stay with these trees, you're going to be okay. You don't get lost. So Buddha was blazing the trail for the rest of us. So then it goes in the headline, what can this book do for you? So the flow doesn't sound very good there, so let me just say it again. Then the story goes, he sat down in desperation. This is the same problem that Buddha confronted. I'm talking about those things. So then what can this book do for you? Then fits that context a little better, right? If you remember that. So do we need another book about Zen? Maybe not. But you personally may need to learn this attitude towards Zen and adapt its natural approach to Zazen. Your enjoyment of Zen meditation as a practical method for meeting the demands of daily life will simplify your life. "'Tis the gift to be simple," as the song has it. Simplicity is one of the highest values in design as well as in Zen, and equally difficult to achieve in each discipline. Classic examples in design include the bobby pin, safety pin, and the basic tools and machines, such as the wheel, inclined plane, or the lever. To enter and explore the original frontier, you will need to pack some simple tools in your backpack. This book is such a tool, meant for the serious seeker of modern Zen, experienced in meditation or not, who is ready and willing to give unguided, upright seated meditation a try. But it is not my intention to meet your expectations of what meditation is or what you think it should be. That book would not be very useful to you. While other books also encourage you to practice meditation, I want to do so via an approach that is down to earth, demystifying the process. Zazen is different from other styles of meditation. It is much simpler in concept, irreducibly simple. But it can be difficult in application because we overcomplicate it. When it comes to finding balance in life, as well as the opportunity and potential for spiritual insight, there is an application for that. It's called Zen, and the active interface is Zazen. If you are not actively practicing Zen meditation, no amount of reading about it will be of much help. In Zazen itself is where you will find the operative answers you seek. The literature is merely the backup documentation. Zen teachers provide technical support to those using the software. Working with a living Zen teacher may be ideal, but they are in scarce supply and not absolutely necessary, at least not in the beginning. It is enough for now to get started working on Zen meditation. When the time comes, your teacher will appear, it is said. This text can be your teacher for now, however inadequate to the task, until the real thing comes along. If you are a novice, perhaps you will be encouraged to give Zen a try. If you are already practicing, my words may persuade you to delve even deeper into the original frontier of the Zen mind, and will perhaps help to clear up any remaining questions you may still have regarding Zen practice. If you have given up, a lapsed meditator, or feel you have plateaued, hopefully my words will convince you to try again, to try harder. So then, how to read this book? Wherever you happen to land on the experiential spectrum of meditation, you may find the most useful sections and chapters of the text to be those on how Zen and Zazen actually work, as the chapters on what it is and what it is not. Such as the chapters as what it is and what it is not. The long section on deconstructing the senses takes a deep dive into what changes you may experience during meditation, taken from my personal field notes. The later chapters discuss certain predictable and unpredictable effects of extended meditation, as well as some direct and indirect benefits of Zen practice on daily life. The few conclusions I draw place Zen in the broader perspective of the great American meme, the frontier, as the gate to the original frontier of mind and spirit discovered by Buddha so long ago. But any text on Zen, and especially on Zazen, it seems to me, should be read intermittently between meditation sessions to be most effective. Again, the utility of reading about Zen, as opposed to actually practicing Zazen, may be regarded as analogous to the instructions that come with computer software. Most apps provide online manuals, training tutorials, and tech support. Such information is useless, however, unless you're actually using the application. But if you are and run into a glitch, troubleshooting tips can be a time and lifesaver. But there is no substitute for live coaching, and the same may be said of Zen. If utilized in a similar manner, this text can function like the reference for a new operating system or application. Unless you're actually using the application, Zazen, the documentation, this book, will make little or no sense. But this text can provide a kind of user's manual for your Zazen, and hopefully help you solve problems as they arise, providing patches or workarounds for any glitches you may encounter on the cushion. I harbor no delusions that simply reading my comments about Zen, however cogent and well-intended, will bring about any kind of transformative experience for you. Like my teacher, I do not recommend reading too much about Zen. For me, sitting in meditation comes first and foremost. However, studying the extensive record of Zen's ancestors, as well as contemporary writings, if pursued as an adjunct to Zazen, can help to clarify your own experience. So let me stop there again. There's one more brief section in this introduction. Anybody?
I particularly like the software analogy. I've worked with code every day for my job, so it made a lot of sense. And I also like the demystification approach. I think one thing I found very refreshing about Zen when I was introduced to it was that it was very not superstitious. It was a very practical, kind of hands-on way of just engaging with reality.
There's a section in here where I take on jargon, for instance, and I talk about samadhi, and talk about what people throw samadhi around like they know what it means, and you don't. Right?
Yeah.
So us teachers know what samadhi is, but you don't. Right? So it's one of our up our sleeve kind of mysteries that we might share with you. So if you analyze samadhi and just start talking about it as balance, centeredness, which is some of the definitions of it, then you can see that what we start with is physical balance, right? We try to achieve some kind of physical balance so we can sit comfortably for long periods of time. And since mind and body cannot separate, along with physical balance, once you get there, and it's especially hard for men are muscular, and this is a very difficult posture. Women tend to, my mother said, women are more loosely put together. So women tend to be, it's more comfortable for them from the beginning, but then mental issues can set in more quickly too. So I think it's good that we have something to work against, and we have something that is a sense of accomplishment. I can now sit for half an hour without going crazy, right? And it's kind of okay. And then I can sit for an hour and a half now. I can sit for a day, that kind of thing. So from physical samadhi or physical balance comes emotional balance, less anxiety, less mental confusion, mental samadhi, mental balance. Eventually, I think social samadhi, less difficulty with relationships. So if you think of, physical, emotional, and mental samadhi, you can see how that all is holistic, right? It all goes together. And most people come wanting to be a better person and wanting to have better relationships and wanting to do better in life. And that's really putting the ox before the cart, so to speak. That's, that will come. But first you have to be okay by yourself on the cushion, right? And then you may be okay at the office, and you may be okay, right? And people report back to this. They say people are coming, trying to push my buttons, and it doesn't work anymore, and they wonder what's happened. Right? Well, that's the way. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like demystifying samadhi to say, oh, here's how it seems to work. Right. Anybody else? Okay, trudging on. So the last. Okay, for me, sitting in meditation comes first and foremost. However, studying the extensive record of Zen's ancestors as well as contemporary writings, if pursued as an adjunct to Zazen, can help clarify your own experience. Then beware of book knowledge. Subtitle. When I began training with Matsuoka Roshi in the 1960s, one literally could have read every book about Zen then published in English, which is unlikely today. But even then, my teacher warned against the dangers of what he termed book knowledge, the conceit that reading everything available about Zen is tantamount to actually understanding Zen. I once mentioned Zen to a fellow professor at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and he responded, "Oh, I read all the books about Zen. I know all about it." In those days, Americans were just beginning to wake up to meditation and the message of Zen, forming opinions and expectations as to its meaning, and for some, realizing its implications for their lives. They were few and far between, however. Nowadays, it seems you can't throw a stone without hitting someone doing meditation. The irony of concluding introductory comments with a cautionary statement about reading books about Zen in a book about Zen is not lost on me. But especially in today's society, where publishing a tell-all book is the default response to any newsworthy event, such as the latest politician to resign or be fired, it is countercultural to suggest that reading about something may not be the best way to learn about it. But in the case of Zen, this is the case. The map is not the territory, as we say, and reading is like studying a map rather than actually exploring the original frontier. Actual exploration is demanding and sometimes discouraging. Exploring Zen, the map is useful up to a certain point when it must be abandoned, as must most of the baggage we bring with us on the journey. You will be tempted to give up on the trail of Zen meditation, which most Westerners do too soon. I must admit that I have also felt like giving up on this text several times. My writing process entails the usual steps: putting down a first draft, then reworking with suggestions from reading groups, submitting the manuscript for publication, receiving rejection letters. Then reworking with an editor, reading aloud, redrafting with an ear to tone, and on, and so on and on and on. Endlessly, it seems. You could continue to perfect the same book for the rest of your life. Zen practice follows a similar, seemingly repetitive arc, as we will see. If you have ever tried to write for publication, you are familiar with the old saw that writing is really rewriting. But there is a limit to the patience we have for listening to our own voice and for revisiting our own failings. We really do tend to be our own worst critics. It is no different in Zen training. All this is a long-winded way to say that Zen can work for anyone, including you. It is the ultimate in spiritual DIY, do it yourself. Even with a guiding teacher and a supportive community, you are still basically on your own, on the cushion. But you are never alone. All the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have I'm going to have to take this out, I think. Past, present, and future, quote, as innumerable as the sands of the Ganges. To borrow an old Indian expression, are practicing with you. at any given time, somewhere on the planet, people are practicing meditation. I hope my humble efforts inspire you to join them in the adventure. The original frontier is calling. I don't think I can leave it in. Anyway, that's the introduction. These things catch you by surprise. I was telling the story of Huinong putting down the road, and the guy couldn't move it one time, and it just broke me up. It's just too much.
Did you say you have to take that part out?
I don't know. It's
Given your reaction, I think you have to leave it in.
Every once in a while they get you. That's how they get you. Some of the great teachings are like that. You relive. It's as if you're living them when you read them. So Dogen gets a little churchy like that. That's a little high church. Right? So maybe it's okay. So how are we doing on time? I've got time here. So
15 minutes.
Okay. So let's turn the rest of it into just discussion. Goes on to designing a Zen life. Goes on to Matsuoka coming to America, Zen in the 40s and in the 50s, and Zen in the 60s, and some quotes from Daniel Goleman about the varieties of religious experience, the varieties of meditative experience, that kind of thing. So there's a little, I'm trying to strike a balance between somewhat, not really scholarly, but sort of grounded discussion, and then some of the later chapters are very speculative, and in the middle it's descriptive. The chapter Joshua was talking about talks about the senses and what happens, how our senses adapt if you sit still enough, long enough. At least the things I've seen and heard and felt, gone through. So any other comments, questions? Michael?
I tend to be very image driven.
You think what?
Image driven, and I was just curious.
You think it is image driven, you're
I
saying?
said I tend to be image driven.
Oh.
My question is, have you designed the cover?
They say they will look at my designs. They're open to seeing, they want suggestions. I try to have an image floating in my mind. What do you have in mind? What do you see?
Well, I'm a technically trained illustrator. I'd be open to helping you with that if you want to, create something.
That would be great.
I guess from this particular reading, and I understand that it's just the tip of the iceberg, I was really my images were very much the looking in the mirror, because there is an idea of the original frontier, but yet for the people who read it, it's actually the new frontier. It will be an experience of a new frontier. So there's that looking into the mirror reflection of the old and the new kind of thing that was starting to run an image in my mind. But again,
did I send you this manuscript?
Excuse me?
Did I send this to you?
I have not read it, and I would love to.
I can send it to you if you want to look at it, because it goes into the final frontier, goes into the frontiers of technology, all the kinds of frontiers we're faced with now in one section of it.
I would love to read it.
I can send a copy to you. It's under copyright, or it can't be. You can't. The intellectual property will become owned by the publisher. So it can't be distributed or anything. But yeah, if you're going to do an illustration, that would be great. Anyone else? Okay, I'm calling you out. No. April?
I'm interested in the second chapter about designing Zen life. I find that one of the things that's been absent in a lot of the books that I've read about Zen is how to actually kind of structure your life in a way that makes Zazen easier and more, I guess, so that you can deepen your practice.
Yeah. The first paragraph, I think, introduces pretty well, so I might read that one to you, and you can get an idea where it's going. And it has a lot to do with a lot of the work that Andrew and I do together, doing workshops on creativity. And my viewpoint regarding Zen training is informed by a background in creativity, training, and design thinking. My mentors in design are complementary influences to my mentors in Zen. Design as a profession regards nearly everything in life as a problem, one that can be subject to redesigning. A classic example in product design is that of the chair, a common assignment for industrial design students. Do we really need another chair? So this argument, do we really need another Zen? Do we really need another chair? Aren't there enough chairs already? The conventional answer to these questions respectively are no and yes. Most folks do not need, quote, another chair. In Zen, we typically sit on the floor. So the need for chairs in general comes into question. Chair sitting certainly has made a not insignificant contribution to the general deterioration of fitness and flexibility in an aging American population. What began as a throne ends as a wheelchair. Notable exceptions include when a chair is not just another chair, but provides other functions, such as adjustable ergonomic support of the body, sitting at a desk all day, somewhat ameliorated by the advent of adjustable desks for standing at work. Thank you, Mr. Churchill. Or built-in therapeutic features such as massage and heat. Remember the Franklin chair, which flips over to provide a stepladder. Probably the first transformer. Perhaps the first transformer design in history, anticipating many of today's popular toys. A design student is called upon to embrace all of these realities in pursuing an assignment, coming up with yet another iteration of the chair. The challenge in reinventing such a ubiquitous item, is the heart of innovation. How can we come up with a meaningful solution to this basic problem? Training in basic problem-solving methods in a variety of applied contexts, whether for the sake of a client or for the general public, fosters a generalist rather than a specialist attitude. In this same way, we also have to reinvent Zen. Does that give you an idea?
Yes.
I like the section about your own struggles to write the book. And it reminded me of my favorite chapter from Moby Dick. So I'm going to talk about that real quick. So in Moby Dick, there's a book within the book. There's a chapter called On Cetology, and it's just him, it's Melville describing everything he knows about whales. And he says, this chapter is my dictionary of whales. And almost everything he says is wrong. He says whales are fish. He says blue whales are smaller than sperm whales. He's passionate about all this. And then at the end of the chapter, he says, and it's sort of a metaphor for the whole book. And at the end of the chapter, he says, anything worth doing is worth not doing. Anything worth doing is worth doing wrong. So this chapter, this book, is just a draft of a draft. He says that you can't accomplish anything that you want to accomplish, but it's okay to just fail at every single aspect of it.
And it's in the middle of one of the greatest literary accomplishments of all time.
Yeah.
You remember where it comes in the book?
It's around the middle. Yeah.
It's right at the climax.
On Cetology?
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't read it in a while.
The book Andrew is currently working on is kind of like that. He's searching for the format as he goes and not really writing to a standard format. It's a little scarier.
Braver.
Yeah. So anyone else? I'm not going to call you out this time. Okay, we're almost there. Okay, let me just read a little bit at the tail end, the very last part of it, which is called The Original Frontier. So the sections in this one are there's a section called Zen is always contemporary. This frequent saying of my teacher bears repetition with each new generation. Zen is universal in its scope and adaptability. It is especially accessible to the modern mindset and lifestyle, offering a simple and efficient style of meditation that you or anyone, anywhere, anytime can adopt without undue disruption to your daily life. Practicing Zazen promises to pay dividends on your investment in it. And then caveat, this may seem to be slipping down the slope of making wild and unsubstantiated claims for Zen, something untested in your life thus far. But again, this case cannot be made a priori prior to your actually practicing Zazen. This is not a cop-out, just a simple truth. and so forth. And in this regard, Zen is no different than any other apprenticeship program, and so forth, that kind of thing. And then not everyone may be ready for Zen, but Zen is for everyone as well. Some of those. So, if not now, when? Awakening to reality, exploring the original frontier, as Americans were captivated by the idea of the frontier in all its iterations. The geographical frontier, represented by the North and South American continents in colonial times, the final frontier of outer space, and the frontiers of imagination and science, to name a few. Now we are embarking upon the exploration of another order of frontier, that of the mind. Not only in science, which is making great strides in studies of the brain and understanding the intelligence of humans as well as other sentient beings, but in terms of personal insight as represented by the revival of contemplative and meditative traditions. So then if you find yourself drawn to Zen and its meditation, you will encounter something of the wonder, awe, and terror characteristic of the frontiersman's experience. Not only that of those pioneers setting sail from Europe who navigated the historical settlement of the continental United States, or the earlier Vikings, or the prehistoric diaspora from Asia, but also those intrepid explorers of today, including insentient beings, aka robots, entering upon the frontiers of space and plumbing the depths of the planet's vast oceans. Not to mention those living adventurers boldly exploring the scientific and technological boundaries of the future, such as genetics, frontiers equally terrifying in their potential for dystopian or utopian consequences. But the original frontier, first discovered, explored, and reported back to the rest of us by Shakyamuni Buddha, settled and documented by his followers, is a frontier of a different order. It is not limited to geographic boundaries, limits of science and technology, but only those of consciousness itself. Its territory is universal and absolute. Entering this frontier is entering the world of Zen. It is my world, and you are welcome to it. I could credit Thurber with that, I think. And the original frontier goes into, this is the last section, remembering the old frontier. The idea and ideal of the frontier is burned into the American psyche, much like a cattle brand. But the place it holds in our imagination may be mostly based on myth. Frontiersmen were ostensibly bold and brave, self-reliant, and adventurous, traits partially, if not completely, driven by necessity. Seemingly endless western frontier, the vast North American continent, provided ample opportunity for adventure, freedom, independence, and initiative, and so forth. Then recognizing the new frontier, the allure of the frontier still attracts, though many may feel we have conquered them all. The promise of the promised land still beckons just over the next horizon. Today, however, geographical horizons are more clearly more limited than they seemed just a few centuries ago. Humankind's great success story in exploring and occupying nearly every nook and cranny of the globe has come back to bite. The frontiers of the physical planet, as well as its resources, are clearly finite and shrinking relative to population. Today's unexplored physical frontiers are those of Earth's wide and deep oceans and the celestial bodies, the Moon and Mars, as well as other solar system planets floating in the ocean of outer space. And then I go into the non-geographical ones, the frontiers of technology and so forth. So we reach a distinct turning point, one of irreversible intent and consequence, and there's no going back. It's like swimming halfway to the island. You say, oh, I'm going to go back. These characteristics are also true of the spiritual frontier, which is the one discovered by Shakyamuni Buddha, but it has no geographical limitations. I like to refer to this exotic realm as the original frontier. I have trademarked it and own the domain, so hands off. Of course, you're invited to enter the actual domain yourself on your cushion. And then the last one is re-entering the original frontier. One night, the young prince Siddhartha sat down under a tree after pursuing various paths and disciplines for 6 years or so. Resolved to solve the conundrum of the intense suffering he had witnessed or die trying, he sat for 49 straight days, according to legend. He did not die, fortunately for us and for all of humanity. However, what had been known as Siddhartha Gautama did cease to exist. The self, with its long list of unique human traits, no longer obtained. What arose from that long, dark night of meditation was awake, with a capital A, Buddha. The young prince was liberated from all prior causes and conditions, released from all self-limiting attributes and entanglements. But the actual circumstances of his life had not magically changed. Buddha himself had changed. For cynics trained by our comic book culture, this begins to sound a bit melodramatic. Siddhartha ducks into the telephone booth, Zazen, realizes supreme perfect awakening, in Uttara Samyak Sambodhi, and emerging stands revealed as Shakyamuni, sage of the Shakya clan.
In fairness, both superheroes and Shakyamuni wore capes. Right?
That's right. And he wore his wrapped around. But all sarcasm aside, in doing so, Buddhism opened the original frontier for the rest of us, a genuine frontiersman and a real superhero. Buddha saw into the true condition of life, the built-in unsatisfactory limitations of existence, the true nature of suffering, as relentless change in this physical universe. While most of us seek various ways to avoid, ignore, or transcend the discomforting attributes of impermanence, imperfection, and substantiality, Buddha's awakening brought them front and center. They stand as a sober and compassionate reassessment of his and our reality. So anyway, in the last paragraph, in his awakening, Buddha directly realized the nature and meaning of existence itself and of his own place in it. And by extension, the place of all humanity, yours and mine. He was, as we are, finally and fully at home, in our true home, in the heart of the original frontier. The takeaway? Do thou likewise come home to Zen. So how many would like to read what's in between?
Heck yeah, it's awesome. And you know, for those of you who haven't been here for 10 years or so, he's been working on it. It's come a long way.
Two or three others said, I can't stand this anymore. I go work on them. I go work on art. I go work on music. I go work on Zen. I like to keep my doors open, options open. I think a lot of you do too. Right? Joshua, you're a musician. It's Zen, I think, is the heart of creativity. And I think the two reinforce each other. No matter what you do, I think your Zazen, your Zen, especially Zazen, is going to reinforce what you do as long as you don't mix them up. Make an issue of it. Thank you for your patience in listening. Let's do the closing verse. We didn't do the opening verse, but we can close. Somebody has the bell.
Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it.
My deadline is March 1st.
Wow, you got it.
Now you
got
put a
it.
deadline on it?
I worked.
Now you put a deadline on it?
They did.
Oh, okay. Whoa.
That was a really short deadline.
Well,
Volunteer to clean the teacup.
probably buy a little more time. We need a volunteer for the teacup. Please leave no traces. Put everything back better than we found it.
Oh, you